thanks for managing expectations for me. Thomas Edison, renowned American inventor and businessman. His inventions are responsible for establishing entire industries. His incandescent light bulb and his carbon microphone started the electric sector and the telecommunications sector. If we could bring Thomas Edison here today, he'd understand perfectly what was going on with the lights in this room, with the sockets that are powering our equipment, but he'd have absolutely no idea what I'm holding in my hand at this moment. He would marvel at the power that's been placed in the palm of consumers' hand through the advancements in telecommunications. Edison would also be entirely familiar with how we generate electricity these days, because he founded the very first investor-owned power utility. He'd look at the power plants today, massive fossil fuel-driven plants that supply 70% of our electricity today. They force electrons down hundreds of miles of wires until they flood into our homes. And each and every day, they're responsible for 40% of the GHG emissions that go into our environment. I'm going to ask you to consider whether we might be able to produce and distribute electricity in a way that makes more sense in today's world. But first, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. Who paid their electricity bill last month? That's very good, very prudent of you. It's a handy thing, isn't it? You don't want to be cut off. Now tell me, and be honest about this, who actually understood their bill before they paid it? You, ma'am. I think if you could bottle that into 18 minutes, you'd have the most popular TED Talk. I find this to be just completely insane. The electric utility is the single largest utility bill that we pay each and every month, and yet we don't understand what we're being asked to pay for. We don't know how much we're using or what it costs when we use it, and we aren't given the tools to manage our consumption. Now, why is that? I think it's time to change the electricity sector. I think it's time to change it in the way that we've changed things like the telephone industry before it. Think about the telephone industry for just a moment. When I got my first job, which was not that long ago, telephone mobility really meant trying to find the nearest payphone and hoping you had change in your pocket. Am I right? Yet just the other day, I phoned my telecommunications provider and I leased a new smartphone for my daughter, Brenna. While I was at it, I changed the plans on all of our phones. I increased the amount of internet data that we receive in the house each month, and I increased the speed of the data. And then I customized all of our satellite TV channels because our tastes are changing. And I did all of that with one phone call. Why aren't the electric utilities making the same sort of changes to meet customer needs? I mean, the telephone sector went from being a hardwired monopoly to a wireless bonanza for consumers. We need to change the electricity sector. My contention is that if we're going to make that sort of change to an entrenched industry that's been reticent to change, like the electricity sector, we're going to need a disruptive technology. And we're going to need consumers to embrace that technology the way that they embrace cell phones to change the telecommunications sector. I believe that solar power, solar panels like these ones behind me, have become cheap enough to be that disruptive technology. And I believe that consumers in North America are going to follow the lead of the Europeans and other countries around the world in adopting solar technology. The beautiful thing about solar is that it empowers consumers to be producers as well as consumers, to produce electricity and consume electricity. Produce, consume, prosumers. Now, why is it that consumers are going to have to bring about this sort of change? How is it that the industry is not going to change itself if the technology has become as accessible as I say? It's because the electric utility business model has been one of the most effective, predictable, profit generators in all of history. There's no reason to change it on their behalf. If Thomas Edison were here today, he'd be able to tell us exactly how utilities make money, because he established the first utility. His view to generating and selling electricity was to create mini generating stations powered by direct current, his invention. He invented direct current so that he could power the incandescent light bulb, and he had a vision for the world that was 1 million points of light powered by tiny distributed generating stations for all of the people around the world, and doing it at a cost that was less than the cost of burning a candle or burning an oil lamp. But it was his apprentice, Nikola Tesla, who came up with the winning formula for delivering electricity, the alternating current. It meant that electricity could be delivered over very long wires to large amounts of customers over large geographic areas. But it also meant that very large plants could be built by very large companies. And it became the blueprint for industrialized nations all over the world in terms of generating and distributing electricity. So if you are a utility in Tesla's construct, what do? You build the biggest possible plant, you run it with the cheapest available fuel, and you provide as many electrons to as many customers as you're able to. Big plants, cheap fuel, captive customers. It's why we have thousands and thousands of fossil fuel plants that are providing for our electricity needs today. And it's why, as I speak here at this moment, there are thousands of more applications in the pipeline to build more of them. I believe that we need prosumers to step up to the plate and empower themselves, and to do it in a way that allows them to harness the energy of the sun. Now, we don't give the sun as much thought as we used to when we lived by the cycles of the sun. But I think all of us deep down know that the sun powers our entire ecosystem. In fact, even the fossil fuels that we burn today are simply compressed plants and animals that have become some sort of fossilized solar fuel. We've actually had the technology to take the power of the sun and power all of our electricity needs for over 40 years. The amount of sun that hits the Earth in a single day using the existing technology is enough to meet all of our energy needs. I would like to show you an example of that technology. It's only become disruptive recently because of its price, but it's a beautiful technology. It's thin, it's light, it's made from the most abundant material in the earth, in the Earth's crust, next to oxygen. It lasts for 30 years. The sunlight hits the panel. It agitates electrons, which are sent through a junction box in the back and through a wire into your home. And the fuel is completely free. And we're not going to run out for another 4 billion years. Now, solar just got disruptive in about 2008 when the price hit a sweet spot. I'm going to talk about that. But if you look at this chart, and you can see that in 1977, when the price of a solar watt for one of these panels was about $77, by 2013 it had declined to the mid-70 cents. In 2008, regions around the world began to adopt it because it was almost competitive with some of the other electricity sources around it. But what's happened between 2008 and 2013 is that the prices have declined another 80%. And since the end of 2013 to the end of the first quarter this year, we've seen another drop of 10 cents. This sort of price drop is making it competitive with all sorts of fuels, and it explains the unbelievable adoption worldwide of solar PV. In 2010, renewable energy attracted more investment globally than fossil fuels did. In 2012, Germany installed, I should say Europe, all of Europe, installed more solar electricity than any other type of electricity generation. In fact, Germany installed so much solar over the last several years that on sunny days at peak times, solar electricity is providing for 50% of the entire country's electricity needs. In Ontario, where I'm from, we have just launched the biggest carbon reduction initiative in North America by phasing out coal plants. They used to provide for 25% of our electricity. And we've replaced those coal plants with renewable energy. Solar has been the most pivotal part of that formula for replacing coal. And in the space of a few short years, we have already installed enough solar PV in Ontario to power 300,000 homes. In the United States, which got off to a slow start, in typical fashion, they are accelerating beyond other countries at breakneck speed. In the United States, 43 states have entrenched the right for consumers to become prosumers by putting solar panels on their roof. In fact, a new solar installation is connected in the United States every 4 minutes. The type of industry that you need to support that kind of activity already employs more people than the US steel industry. The amazing thing about solar is that it's turning consumers into prosumers. And those prosumers are demanding options for how electricity is generated. They're demanding tools to manage their consumption. Now, the utilities are finding that this is a big dilemma. And in fact, it's a big challenge for them. Their competitive advantage after 130 years is that they own the electricity consumer. But they are about to own a consumer who no longer needs to rely on the only product that they produce and deliver. And what's happening is that smaller, innovative, and nimble companies are stealing their customers and turning them into prosumers. They are putting solar on the rooftops of US homes for no money down and saving them hundreds of dollars a month. And now they've begun pairing those solar rooftop systems with electric vehicles and with batteries that are in the garage of their customers so that they can use electricity day and night. A quiet revolution is underway. Now, as excited as I am to think about these new services that are coming up, I want to tell you that when we put solar on our rooftop at home, it was probably one of the most gratifying things I've ever done as a consumer. In fact, I'm completely addicted to checking the production of our solar panels from my smartphone. It's not so good from a work perspective. But I want to show you what I see when I check the production that's happening on my roof. There you see the panels beginning to produce electricity as the sun rises. And it's the wonderful thing about solar energy. We've always followed its cycles. And solar panels produce electricity when it's needed. That is, when we get up each day, and start making coffee, getting ready to go to school, and getting ready to go to work. And that's exactly what we do. We send the kids off to school, I leave for work, and my wife Lee, who works from home, uses our electricity. But the fact is that Lee is not using as much of the electricity as is being produced by our system. And so it goes out onto the street, and it's soaked up by our nearest neighbors who require it. So Fraser next door, who works from home, and his retired wife, Susan, or our neighbors who are kitty corner to us, who have young children and a mother who stays at home, are using the rest of our electricity. It's really quite a remarkable thing. If we are going to revolutionize the electricity sector, if we're going to turn it into a green and modern system, then we're going to have to turn ourselves from consumers into prosumers. It's time to rebuild the electricity system. It's time to revolutionize it the way that we've revolutionized the telephone industry before it. If Thomas Edison were here today, he would be a champion of the prosumer. And he would be the CEO of a utility that was progressive and bringing these services to us and meeting consumer demand. He recognized the incredible power of the sun over a century ago when he said, "I'd put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power." I hope we don't have to wait until we run out of oil and coal to tackle that. Thank you.